Hello, everyone, and welcome to UNB Talks Online. Today's webinar is on the impact of cross-cultural communication, and we are so pleased to have you all join us for this conversation. My name is Michelle McNeil. I'm the Executive Director of UNB's Associate Alumni, and it is my great pleasure to be your host today. We're welcoming alumni from all over the world today who have registered to be with us. We have people here from Canada and the US, as well as Botswana, Ukraine, Trinidad and Tobago, Slovenia, Egypt, and Pakistan. So welcome to all of you wherever you're joining us from. I do encourage you to use the chat function in Zoom to interact with each other and also with the content that's going to be presented today. But if you have any questions that you want me to ask the presenter during the Q&A portion of the event, please use the Q&A function in Zoom to submit those questions. You can just click on that. It's probably at the bottom of your screen. It would just say Q&A, and you can submit questions there. That way I'll see them and be able to ask the questions at the end of the event. So I am now honored to introduce you to our presenter for today. Samah El Maghlawy is a marketing and communications expert with significant international business experience. After completing her MBA at UNB St. John, Samah developed a passion for teaching. She's been teaching part-time in the Faculty of Business since 2015. She advocates active learning and thinks the best way to foster understanding is to make knowledge relevant to the real world. Samah has started her journey of learning and teaching intercultural communication with her MBA research about immigrant entrepreneurs' intentions and motivations. She's currently a certified cultural competency trainer and teaches intercultural communication and negotiation courses to MBA students at UNB. She's been an active volunteer in the community since she moved to St. John with her family 15 years ago and is now the lead for pre-employment services with the St. John Newcomers Center. Samah is promoting cultural competency skill development and sharing her knowledge with many organizations and newcomer groups in the community. Welcome, Samah.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And thank you for the great introduction, and thank you for the opportunity to share my passion now with the fellow alumni. So to start, I would like to share with you my passion for cross-cultural communication. Next slide, please. So just a bit of a personal introduction as well is I come originally from Egypt. I lived in UAE for over 9 years, and we made Canada home 15 years ago. As many newcomers experience, it's challenging sometimes to maintain your own culture and adapt effectively in a new culture. It's often fun, interesting, but sometimes frustrating and challenging. It was until I found this quote that I would like to share with you here. I'm trying to read the quote. I love being able to choose to be whoever I want, wherever I go. My many masks are a storyboard of all that I am. I've gradually built myself an identity that is a collection of pieces, each of which I've handpicked, choosing the best bits to create a whole. This started my passion and journey to learn cross-cultural communication and teach cross-cultural communication. Next, please. So today, what I would like to talk to you about are 3 parts. I teach this in a full course, 10 weeks of 4 hours each. So I'm trying to put everything in 40 minutes here. So I'm going just to test the water. I'm going just to give you a brief introduction of what I'm passionate about and why I'm passionate about this, and maybe tips. I think this session would be a foundation or a starting point for your journey as well in cross-cultural communication. So today I want to talk about developing self-awareness. How can you identify your biases? How can you be sure that you're not seeing the world through only your own lens? Gain knowledge. I want to share with you some of the books that I've read or the concepts I came across that really changed my perception of cross-cultural communication. And I would like also to give you a chance to create an action plan. What do you need to do going forward? How can you gain tools and strategies to deal with cross-cultural communication? Next, before I start, I wanna talk about how lucky we are to be in a diversity in Canada. Canada is a mosaic of cultures. 1 in 4 from the population are immigrants. We have over 190 different countries and different cultures here. In 2022, Canada welcomed 430,000 immigrants. We have around 30,000 immigrants in New Brunswick. There is a target of over 7,000 immigrants yearly in New Brunswick. So these are all stats that show us how diverse we are, how important it is to integrate cultures and to learn how to deal with each other effectively. Next, please. So the starting question is, how familiar are you with other cultures? When I ask these questions to people, of course, I get a rating of 8 or 9, minimum of 5. We're very familiar. We are in Canada, we've lived in Canada, or we came to Canada. We have been seeing and dealing with people from different cultures all our lives, or part of our life, or the majority of our lives. But once we start really digging deep, we'll find that we are not as familiar with other cultures as we think we are. And as a demonstration, I want to share with you the next video. I can't see the screen. Thank you.
So imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in America, and a Japanese man comes up to you and says, excuse me, what is the name of this block? And you say, I'm sorry, well, this is Oak Street, that's Elm Street. This is 26th, that's 27th. He says, okay, but what is the name of that block? And you say, well, blocks don't have names. Streets have names. Blocks are just the unnamed spaces in between streets. He leaves a little confused and disappointed. So now imagine you're standing on a street anywhere in Japan. You turn to a person next to you and say, excuse me, what is the name of this street? And they say, oh, well, that's block 17 and this is block 16. And you say, okay, but what is the name of this street? And they say, well, streets don't have names. Blocks have names. Just look at Google Maps here. There's block 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. All of these blocks have names, and the streets are just the unnamed spaces in between the blocks. And you say, okay, then how do you know your home address? I said, well, easy. This is District 8. There's block 17, house number 1. You say, okay, but walking around the neighborhood, I noticed that the house numbers don't go in order. He said, of course they do. They go in the order in which they were built. The first house ever built on a block is house number 1. The second house ever built is house number 2. Third is house number 3. It's easy. It's obvious. So I love that sometimes we need to go to the opposite side of the world to realize assumptions we didn't even know we had, and realize that the opposite of them may also be true. So for example, there are doctors in China who believe that it's their job to keep you healthy. So any month you are healthy, you pay them. And when you're sick, you don't have to pay them because they failed at their job. They get rich when you're healthy, not sick. In most music, we think of the 1 as the downbeat, the beginning of the musical phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4. But in West African music, the 1 is thought of as the end of the phrase, like the period at the end of a sentence. So you can hear it not just in the phrasing, but the way they count off their music. 2, 3, 4, 1. And this map is also accurate. There's a saying that whatever true thing you can say about India, the opposite is also true. So let's never forget, whether at TED or anywhere else, that whatever brilliant ideas you have or hear, that the opposite may also be true. Domo arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you. We move to the next slides, please. The next one. So what's culture? And others, click, please. If you Google what's culture, you'll find at least 400 definitions for cultures. I picked this one because I particularly like 2 words or 3 words in it. It's the unconscious pattern of behavior and beliefs that are common to a person, nation, or an organization. The 2 words that I particularly like are unconscious and then behavior and beliefs. 3 words, actually. It's unconscious. It's a script. We are not consciously doing what we're doing. We are just raised and been doing it all our lives. It's unconscious. We are not really aware of what we're doing, but we are doing it nevertheless. It's behavior that is a result of belief. So there is a reason why we're doing this behavior, and it is because of our belief. Next, please. So you think you are acting normal when you are in your own culture, but what happens when you move to a different culture or you meet people from a different culture? Next, please. You are in a cultural cruise control. You are not conscious of what you're doing. You're doing it automatically. It's by default. We are driving, our minds are focused on what we know, and we're driving it this way. We are not aware of what's happening outside. We are driving on the right-hand side or the left-hand side. This is what we are used to do. This is the right way of doing it. And this is our mind's strategy of adapting or doing things according to all the learnings that we have. But cultural cruise control, as much as it's beneficial because it is a way of us to drive safely and drive well. But if we drive on a different road or with different rules, then our learnings are not really applicable. Next, please. Another concept that I want to share with you is culture iceberg. You're all familiar with the concept, the iceberg. You only see the tip of the iceberg. You don't see what's inside. So if we look at the iceberg as a culture, as a representation of culture, the top part, next please, the top part is only showing what we can experience with our senses, what we can feel, what we can smell, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch. So food, flags, festivals, fashion, holidays, music, performances, all of these we are experiencing because we can see it. But what's lying underneath that, can you bring those please, is the communication style, the notion of courtesy and leadership, cleanliness, the concepts of time, the concepts of fairness, and more. It is also talking about our values and all the concepts that we're really raised to believe in. And this is what's driving our behavior. Next, please. Another one, yes. The approaches to all of that. So what you see is just a small part of the culture, but what lies deep is really what makes up all our cultures. Next. Thank you. Yes, some people might say, yes, the cultures are there, but it is our personality or as humanity. So the culture pyramid is a concept that talks about that we are all on a fundamental level the same. We are all humans. This is assumed that we are all believe in certain things and do not believe in certain things. But the culture that we are talking about today is your ethnic culture, where you're coming from. Of course, even when two people come from the same culture, there comes the tip of the pyramid, which is their individual personality. So you cannot assume that two people who come from Egypt like me and live in Canada will be the same in terms of personality. But what makes the person is all of that pyramid together. Next, please. I want to share with you the challenges. Yes, we know that we need to be culturally competent. We need to communicate effectively in terms of intercultural communication, but these are the biases that stop us or challenges us from doing this. The first is bias, a preference, what we like and we don't like. I might like to deal with women and not men. I might prefer to work with Egyptians and not Americans. I might prefer one group versus the other. And this is a natural tendency. It is based on your personality, on your culture, on your previous experience. Stereotype is the second one. It's our mind's way of simplifying pictures in our heads of people and events. So I say, Canadians are kind, Americans are competitors, Egyptians are talkative. And I'm doing that in a way of combining people, clustering people according to their nationality or according to their culture to make it easier for me to identify. It's a good starting point, but there is much more work to do after that. Ethnocentrism, on the other hand, is a way of me evaluating the other cultures according to my own culture. I see right or wrong according to what I'm doing. If I am religious, then anybody who is not, then they are wrong. Or if I drive on the right side, then anybody who's driving otherwise is wrong. Discrimination moves the challenges to more of the behavior, not the belief. The discrimination is I take all of that and I treat people unfairly because of my previous or my ethnocentrism or biases. And this is an action that is taken against people. So maybe if I have an experience, a bad experience with the Nigerian, I say, I'm not going to hire any Nigerians in the future. So I'm really taking action against that. Next, please. I want to share with you another video about stereotyping. Let me show that.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean. But I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a sporty. Double, toil and trouble. Mind the gap! Beware Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
Thank you. Next. So as you can see, stereotyping can be negative. We sometimes are kindly saying, oh, you speak good English to a newcomer. And where did you learn that from? With an assumption that everybody who comes from this country doesn't speak English and so on. Ethnocentrism is another challenge that we have. If you look at this picture, it's taken in one of the Olympics. And there was a huge debate at the time, which player has the right dress code. If you are from a conservative culture, you will find the player on the left-hand side is the right dress code, and the player on the other side is maybe wearing revealing clothes. Next. But if you are from another culture that sees that this is the right dress code and the other person is wearing the wrong dress code. So it depends on how we see things. We might see the same thing, but interpret it differently because we're seeing it according to our own cultural lens. Thank you. Next, please. Another concept is equally or equity. So we sometimes treat everybody the same. We give everybody the same test, or we expect everybody to do the same thing. Nevertheless, it is hard for someone whose English is not their first language to maybe express themselves the same way that someone who's educated all his or her life in the Canadian system. So how can we be aware that there is equity, that I'm able to give different tests to different people in order to prove themselves? An engineer, a competent engineer, might not speak as perfect English as an American engineer, but what do I need is the competency of the technical competency that this engineer has. So how can I give him the opportunity to express his competency in different ways? Next, please. In terms of learning, the second part of the presentation, I chose to share with you the cultural map. It's a book that is really interesting by Erin Meyer. She talks about dividing the world on a scale on 8 different attributes. And these are communication, evaluating, persuading, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. They seem like generic concepts, they seem like universal concepts, but she was able to divide all the countries on a scale from right to left on each of these attributes. I'm going to go through them very, very quickly, but you're more than welcome to reach out. I can help you understand more about the concepts or guide you to the right resources later on. Can you move on, please? So the first one is communicating, high context versus low context. This is a concept that says people are either high context communicators or low context communicators. When we talk about low context communicators, they are good communication is precise, simple, and clear. Messages are expressed and understood at face value. Repetition is appreciated. If you, it helps clarify the communication. So countries on this side will be the US or Canada, where communication is straightforward, precise. Canadians grow up learning to say what you mean and mean what you say. On the other side, high context cultures are cultures that are focusing on the relationship. The good communication is sophisticated, nuanced, and layered. Messages are both spoken and read between the lines. These cultures focus on the relationship between the sender and the receiver, and they make the communication as a responsibility of both who is saying something and who's hearing that on the other side. There are layers of communication, so you have to read the air, or you have to be aware of the shared context around communication. So my body language, the way I speak, my tone of voice, my poses, all of that has to be taken into account when we're communicating. So the challenge is if someone is straightforward in their communication and someone is using high context communication, the high context communicator might be seen as not direct, not straightforward, not transparent. But on the other side, the low context communicator may be seen as rude or stating the obvious, or thinking that we're stupid because they have to repeat and repeat what they have to say. So the strategy to deal with that would be to understand where the person is coming from and to adapt your communication accordingly. Next, please. The second one is evaluating, and evaluating is talking about, are you from a culture that gives direct negative feedback or indirect negative feedback? And these are two different cultures. It's not related to whether you are from a low context or high context. Sometimes it's the opposite. The US is one of the lowest context countries or cultures because they speak very precise, very straightforward. But when it comes to give feedback, they give indirect negative feedback. So when you're expecting people to state everything they want, when it comes to negative feedback, they are not as direct as other countries. Israel, on the other side, would be one of the highest direct negative feedback. So what the challenges here would be, if you are from a culture and working with another culture, this might be confusing. So if someone tells you, your presentation was okay, but what he or she really means, it was terrible, you need to work harder on that, and you knew that, you will feel betrayed, you will feel this person is not trusted. On the other side, if someone gives you straight negative feedback, direct negative feedback, and you're not used to that, then you will feel this person is rude, it's offending, and I might want to quit because I'm not appreciated. One of the strategies to deal with that in a multicultural collaboration is to use low context. Explain all what you have to do and explain your evaluating strategy. So when you're hearing sometimes, oh, by the way, maybe it actually means the following criticism is the purpose of this discussion. Or when you hear, perhaps you would think about, this is an order, do it or be prepared to justify yourself. So in that sense is what you're hearing. The book talks about children in different school systems. In the French system, it's very, very rare to give excellent grade. In the American or the Canadian system, you are given excellent, you're giving hard work, you're hardly going to hear any negative feedback. So what does this mean in different cultures? If you come from one culture and you go to the other culture, you will have to use the proper evaluation. Next, please. The third one is persuading. Persuasion is fundamentally rooted in the cultures. The ability to persuade in any setting is really important and fundamental, especially in the business world. But how do you persuade depends on which culture you come from. There are cultures that use application first. These are practical cultures. They start with the action plan and then go to the why they're doing that. The other culture is principle first. This is a culture based on theory. When they start the presentation, they start of why they are asking you to do what they're asking you to do. So one focus on the how and one focuses on the why. There can be lots of misunderstanding if you come from one culture and work in another culture or deal with another culture, because the presentation will be different. If you're asked to persuade a group of people about something, you might be doing it in opposite directions. So if you are expecting people to jump to the conclusion and give you an action plan, and then you spend an hour going through the theory, they will think that, why are you doing that? It is obvious. Do you think that we don't understand? You're underestimating our competency and our skill set. On the other hand, if you jump to conclusion with audience who are expecting you to tell them why are you doing that, they will question your credibility or question your skill set. So you need to be going back and forth. You need to understand your audience in order to do a better job in persuading them. Next, please. 4 is leading. Are you in a flat culture or are you in a hierarchical culture? And it is totally different. So if you come from one culture and go to the other, you can face lots of problems. So in an egalitarian culture, or as Hofstede, the researcher, calls it, power level, it is a flat organization, and people are all in the same place. Probably everybody's sitting in the same open space, or there are no hierarchy. You can reach your boss's boss and contact them directly. In a hierarchical organization, it is layers of hierarchy. You cannot jump to other layers. Probably the boss will be sitting in a big office with a window view while you're sitting in a cubicle. And it is expected that power is distributed differently among different levels. So if you come from one culture and go to the other, there can be lots of problems. So if you're Canada is an egalitarian culture. So if you're from Canada and you get someone from China, which is a hierarchical culture, and they join your team, and in a meeting they say nothing, your assumption will be that they are not competent. They don't have anything to say. On the other hand, from their standpoint, they cannot speak unless you ask them to speak, because you're the boss. You control the meeting and you're able to give them the permission or not the permission. They cannot really jump to the discussion without your permission. Next, please. Deciding, is it agreement or is it top down? So some societies, some cultures focus on getting the agreement first. This might take a very long time, but once everybody's on board, then the action items can be done very fast and speedy. On the other hand, there are some organization some cultures which have top-down decision. It's usually the boss making the decision. In this case, it will take much longer in order to implement, because everybody will have their doubts and not being able to do that. So if you come from one culture to the other, it's very hard. I'll give you a personal example. I was helping a Syrian lady here with a doctor, and the expectations from her culture that it's a top-down decision. So the doctor here asked her, what would you prefer? What type of treatment would you want me to administer, or what is your choice? She left the room saying, this doctor is not competent. She doesn't want to deal with him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And it is funny because you see it from a different perspective. he is trying to get her agreement, but from her side, if you are not making the decision top down, then you don't have the skills to make the decision. So it's really important to see that difference. Next, please. 6 is trusting. How do you trust people? Do you trust people with your heart or with your mind? There are cultures that are task-based and cultures that are relation-based. Task-based cultures are focused on cognitive trust. I trust the person because he or she are able to do the job. I've seen them do it and over again. I know I can trust them. On the other side is, I know this person, he's transparent, he's honest, I've seen him, I've seen his personality, then I can trust him. So if two cultures, opposite cultures come into agreement, there can be misunderstanding. An example, if you from two different cultures, and the hosting culture would take the visiting culture to dinner, to a very long dinner with personal interaction, everything. One culture might think that this is creating trust because you are sharing with us, you're investing in the relationship, that's why I trust you. The other culture might feel this is a total waste of time. They're not competent and they're not able to discuss business. So these are the differences in culture that we need to be mindful of. Next, please. 7. Do you agree? Do you confront people when you disagree, or do you avoid confrontations? There are cultures on this side and cultures on this side. So when you're confrontation, that means it's accepted and appreciated when you voice your disagreement. But in the other cultures that avoid confrontation, it will be considered rude. And in China, for example, it will be the concept of losing face. You cannot disagree with someone in front of other people. So this is really important to pay attention to that. So it can be, there can be strategies if you're a confrontational culture and you work with avoiding confrontation culture, there can be strategies like you can take the boss out of the room if there is a brainstorming and there can be disagreement. You can start having anonymous ideas. So people disagree with ideas, not with people. So there are strategies that you can work on both sides in order to reach a better effective communication. And last one, next please, is linear time and flexible time. How late is late? When I ask this question in my class, I get from on time until 50 minutes is still acceptable. So it depends on when you are. One thing that I want to share is with flexible time, people who are not punctual, they're not intentionally careless or don't respect your time. They are more focused on relationships. So if someone has a meeting at 4 and then he bumped into another person, he can talk for a few minutes because talking to that person might be more important than reaching the place on time. If you have a presentation, for example, and you come from a linear time and you want to stop at the dot, like the meeting finishes at 7, I have to stop at 7. But if people still want to ask you questions, if they come from flexible time, they feel that you have a prioritized time versus the relationship that you need to invest in. So that can create lots of issues, and it's really important to be mindful of that. Next, please. So this will be the cultural map, and these are the 8 criteria, the 8 attributes that people are being on one side or the other. Next, please. So 2 things to pay attention to here is, before please, thank you, the range and relativity. The range, someone might say, I don't belong to my culture, I don't do that. My culture is flexible time, but I'm extremely punctual. Yes, of course, there can be personal variation, but this book and this research has been done to capture a range of acceptable and appropriate behavior. So you can be an outlier, you can be out of that range, but what's accepted in this culture is that range. Then the other point is the relativity. It doesn't matter if you're at the far end of the scope or at the far or the other end. This doesn't matter. What matters really is where you are from each other. So if I'm Egyptian and dealing with a Canadian, where are we from one another? Because if you have three cultures, they might be placed differently. So you can be more flexible than one culture, but less flexible than the other. So where are you? So before this presentation, next please, I went and I did a test or analysis for myself. If you can see on the screen here, I chose Canada and Egypt, the two cultures that I belong to. And it's funny because they're completely the opposite on the scale. So one side, the Canadian culture say what they mean and mean what they say. On the other side, the high context culture, Egypt, if you invite me and ask me, are you hungry? Do you want food? I would say no, because it means yes in my culture. It's not polite to say everything straightforward. And it is your job to ask me 3 times before I say yes. I came to Canada here and I went to a friend and I stayed for 3 hours. She asked me one time, are you hungry? And I said, no, thank you. She never asked me again. And I start for the end of the night. Then I learned the hard way is that cultures are different and expectations are different. Still the same for all the other diagrams. Can you go next, please? I even complicated things and added Nigeria and I added to China. And as you can see, they are differently placed. And it's really important to do that. So even if I'm high context, China is a higher context than me, and so on. Next, please. So sometimes what works for you in your home country may work against you here or may not work for you at all. We have to be mindful of that. Whether you are a newcomer or a Canadian, it works both ways. Next, please. So cultural competency is the capacity to communicate effectively across cultures, across cultural difference. And this is what we need to develop. It's a journey, not a destination. You start by gaining skills like any other skills. Next, please. So you start with creating awareness of one's own culture, creating positive attitude towards the cultural difference, gaining knowledge like what you're doing today, understanding different concepts about cultural practice, and then practicing your skills in order to sharpen your skills and be more culturally competent. Next, please. One of the great ideas and the concepts that are shared among researchers is cultural mindfulness. If you do yoga, you know the concept. It is the same concept as yoga, but for culture. Just use your inner senses, use all your senses to understand what's going on around you. Come outside your own culture and be aware of other people's culture. A Chinese once said, you have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth, so use them accordingly. Listen more, see more, and speak less in order for you to understand what's going on around you. Next, please. Manage nonverbal communication because it's 93% of all communication is nonverbal. So look at people, understand their poses, understand their facial expression, how they appreciate things, how they might want something, but they're not really saying them because they come from different culture. What works as a gesture in your culture doesn't work in another culture. Eye contact. We always, in Canada and the States, we say eye contact is really important in a presentation. In other cultures, it is offensive to have eye contact with someone with a higher status than you are. Next, please. Adjust your communication styles. This slide shows 3 different communication styles and countries belong to a different ones. I'm probably in pattern 3, we talk on top of one another. We're very passionate about communication. This will annoy someone from pattern 2, where they have to speak and then pause for the next person to speak. So adjust your communication styles according to the culture that you're dealing with. Next, please. Ask to understand and appreciate, not to judge. lots of Canadians feel that it is very hard for me to ask. I don't want to offend the person by asking, why do they do what they do? But if you don't, you're offending them more by not being able to deal with them. For newcomers, I would say the same to Canadians. Understand, ask to understand, ask politely. It is easy to say, I see you're doing this. Can you please help me understand the reasons why you're doing this? Because I want to be able to communicate better with you. If you do that, of course, they will understand, they will open up and share with you. On the other side, if you ask, why are you doing this? We don't do that here. That's a totally different story. Next, please. Act as a culture bridge. So ask people, but also share your own culture. When you see a newcomer, tell them, why do you do this way? In Canada, this is what we do. And for newcomers to do the opposite, be a culture bridge. Ask questions and share your own culture. This way, you're able to create more communication and more effective communication. Next, please. And I want to end by saying a multicultural society does not reject the culture of the other, but it is prepared to listen, to see, to dialogue, and in the final analysis, to possibly accept the other's culture without compromising its own. So we are a mosaic of culture. Nobody's asking us as newcomers to leave our culture, and nobody's asking us as Canadians to embrace fully other cultures. We're a mosaic of different cultures. And as I said in the beginning, what really helped me adapt is knowing that I can handpick the attributes of the different cultures and I'll make it my own, because as cultures, we can live effectively together if we are more culturally competent. Thank you.
Oh my goodness, Samah, I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you just shared with all of us. Thank you so much. I learned so much, and I feel a little bit more confidence in this topic that I wouldn't have had before this. So thank you so much for sharing so generously. We do have lots of questions. We have some that were submitted ahead of time and some in the Q&A function here in Zoom. So just a reminder, if you have questions for Samah, you can click on the Q&A button in Zoom and submit it there. And if you see a question that's already been asked that you want asked as well, just like it, and that will rise it to the top for me so I can ask it first. So we're going to start with one. They're asking about in a work situation where there's lots of cultures, would there be value in using that, that culture map or using the criteria that you were discussing to gain everyone's perceptions up front and sort of go into it knowing where everyone's coming from?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Thank you. So I guess it's not very easy if you deal with a culture with so many cultures. I have in my class over 23 different cultures, sometimes 15 or 23. It's very hard for me to go and find every single culture. If I have a partner or if I'm going to work in another culture, yes, definitely. Or I have visitors who are coming from a certain culture, yes, definitely dig deep and understand that and look into that. But one of the easiest ways to do is to first ask, second, communicate. So one of the things is ask people about if you are going to maybe have a brainstorming session or a decision-making process or any of that. Ask people about their input, one, but then once you reach an input or you want to implement it, explain to people. And sometimes I even say, make fun of your own culture. So I tell people that, I say I repeat words and I say that, excuse me, this is stupid of me. My culture is that, but I do that. Or if you want to say, I tell my team is, food is really important in my culture. If you come to any meeting, we have food because this is part of my culture. And I would like to do this way. The decision making in this culture is that and this way. So explaining, setting the expectation and explaining what you're doing is going to bring people in. The problem with culture is unconscious. People might say, what a rude boss. But they will not say, this boss decided to have a top-down decision, and my culture is a consensual decision-making, and that's why we don't appreciate it. People don't say that. But if you are explaining this is the way we're going to do things, it's going to be easier for everyone.
That is such a great perspective. just changing the way that you're thinking a little bit.
Yeah.
You've kind of talked about it in the answer that you just gave, but I'm going to ask this. It's a little bit different. They're asking if there's any value in admitting your own lack of skills in a particular culture and asking for more feedback from the person whose culture you're trying to understand better. Like, is it okay to just say up front, I don't know what I'm doing here. Can I get some help? Or
I think maybe generally 99% of the time, yes, absolutely, because this is show your vulnerability and show your willingness to learn, and this is appreciated. But if you are going to a meeting with a partner in Spain and the whole deal counts on this dealship, and you go to them and say, I don't know anything about your culture, that's a different story. You would need to do some homework to show that you have done the work.
okay, that's really helpful. That's good context. So thinking about students, we would have some students on this call, and some of us work with students. What do you think are some of the most important cross-cultural communication skills for students entering the workplace?
I think, like in general, one thing is, as we have started now, self-awareness, knowing that work for you might not work here. So lots of people come and students, I've studied certain ways, I've done that. I get lots of students say, but the same essay in my own culture would got an A. It got F here. Yes, because things are done differently. So understanding and be self-aware that things are different is the first step. The strategies would be, I would think that is understanding what's important in the workplace. So from all of these attributes, for example, I would pick communication and time management as the two important criteria, because there are lots of differences in this sense. So understand the communication style, because communication is key, and work with the time strategy that is appropriate and accepted in your workplace.
Sorry, I muted myself so you wouldn't hear me shuffling papers, and then I had to get over to it. Thank you for that, Samah. So as a leader of a team, I'm thinking about how I can apply some of what I learned in the workplace to help. We support our alumni all over the world from all kinds of different cultures, as well as our students. I'm just wondering about what employers should be thinking about to support their diverse work teams.
I think making things clearer. I'm not saying that every employer should change their policies to accommodate everyone for everything. Yes, there are social aspects, there are cultural aspects that has to be taken into account. But if you have policies that you're dealing with, it won't be easy to be flexible with that. But what I'm saying, be very clear about saying that. So for example, in some cultures, writing minutes after a meeting demonstrates mistrust. So if I send someone after the meeting a review of the action points, they will feel not trusted, because don't you trust I said I'm going to do it. Why are you doing that? But in other cultures, it's completely the opposite. It's a demonstration of professionalism and really meticulous in your job. So I would say, if my strategy or if my protocol is to send minutes after the meeting, I say, this is silly. I know I trust you and everything, but this is the way that we're doing it here, and we should follow that. So they know it's not you. It's not against what you're used to, but this is the policy of the organization or the team.
So one of the things I appreciate about your presentation and your answers is that you provide really great examples, like concrete, practical examples of what you're talking about. It's really helpful. Thank you for that. And so we have a question from an alum who was born outside of Canada, and they're wondering if there are any specific things they should be aware of when communicating with their Canadian-born colleagues and friends.
Yeah, in communication, understand, I don't know which culture you're saying?
They didn't specify.
Okay, so if you come, there are the 2 points. If you come from a high context and you're dealing, Canadians are low context. Canadians say what they want and mean what they say. So you come from a high context where you expect is, if you're silent, that means you don't agree. They will not understand that. They want you to say no or yes. and it's really important. They write everything, they say everything, so they have explicit demonstration of all the ideas. If you come from a culture that is high context, be aware of that difference and work accordingly. So don't expect them to read the air and understand that your silence means that, or you're not answering means that, or you're saying I'll see means that you're not showing up, things like that. So expect explicit communication.
Okay, well, that was the end of our questions, Samah. So oh, wait a minute, someone just submitted one. Just give me 1 second.
Sure.
Okay, this question says, how do you deal with a situation where you, as a foreign teacher, are teaching students who are Canadian, especially undergraduates, and they tend to laugh at your accent and feel that the teacher doesn't have the necessary skill sets to be teaching? Is there any advice there?
Yes, I teach business communication,
Yeah.
and in my first class, I say, English is not my first language. I make mistakes all the time. I'm here not to teach you English, but teach you the rules of the communication. It helped me personally, and I want to share that with you. If they wanted to find someone to teach an English course, oh, they made a big problem. That's a big problem for them. It's going to be something like that. So they know that I share with them their journey that I've learned. Maybe I'm here, and then they will be able to graduate and find the job and do that. So I think they could take it the other way around, that it's a motivation that I also can do that. I got lots of students in the MBA program who said, I've decided to be a teacher. I thought that I will never be if I come to Canada, but seeing you teach make me realize that it's a possibility. And maybe it is for sure for lots of people.
Well, that was a great question and a great answer for us to wrap up on. I don't know if you've been able to see in the chat, Samah, but people are very grateful to you for this
Thank you so much.
presentation.
And I'm really grateful for this opportunity. I'm really grateful. It's a learning journey for me, and I learn every day something, and I'm happy to share and give back. Absolutely.
It's wonderful. Well, we are so proud to have you part of the alumni family. So thank you so much for
I really
sharing this
appreciate
with
that.
us.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Have a lovely day. Thank you.
So just to wrap up then, I did want to let everyone know I answered in the chat a little bit, but we did record the session, and we're going to share with everyone that was registered this session afterwards. And then we also post it to our alumni website, our UNB alumni website, where all of our webinars go. And lots of people suggested we share it widely. So we're going to do our best to promote it and make sure as many people as possible get this information. Excellent information. I learned an awful lot. So as I mentioned, thank you to Samah for sharing your time and knowledge with us. Thank you to all of you for choosing to engage in this conversation with us. And a special thank you to some of the team in the alumni office who produce our UNB Talks Online series, particularly for this session. Tash Rigo and Diane McAdam were in the background helping everything go smoothly, so thank you. And finally, I wanted to say thank you to our affinity partners, TD Insurance and Manulife. They sponsor this series, but they also make all of our alumni and student programming possible. So if you do need insurance, home, auto, life, health, or travel, I do encourage you to give our partners a call. You'll get a great price and service, and your alumni association receives funds to continue connecting our alumni and supporting our students. So thank you so much for all of your support, and I hope you enjoyed the session. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you.